guys. I hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to be discussing the introduction of Women Who Run with the Wolves, one of my favorite books. And if you didn't see the first video I did on it, just check the library where it lists all my videos, and you'll see that I gave a very brief overview of my impression of the book, what it's all about, and specifically how it relates to narcissism and when you've been on the receiving end of narc abuse, because it is all about reconnecting with your intuition. And that inner guiding light. But this book is so rich, and I hope you'll join me. We're going to take one section at a time, and like I said, today we're starting with the introduction. Okay, so she opens the introduction. First of all, let me share with you the title, because she's super creative, this lady, and you're gonna see as we get into it. And let me go ahead and say, I'm not actually going to be reading through large sections of the book. There's actually a lot of other content creators on YouTube who have done that. They've read the book on their channel. So if you have interest in that, I would recommend looking into, just type in the search bar in YouTube the title of the book, and you'll see all these different content creators who have done a really great job of breaking down their impression and what they've learned from it, and also, like I said, some of them are reading the book. So the introduction is called Singing Over the Bones. Singing Over the Bones. And basically, she starts out by discussing how society progresses, how it's always progressed, how, there's always been destruction before construction, and how nature has just been plummeted, pillaged. And that's something we can all relate to in our own hometowns and everywhere you look. It's progress, right? So she really goes into details about that. And the way this book is written, yes, she has the segments where there's the stories, and they're super rich and colorful. You can literally imagine the story as you're reading it. She's an incredible storyteller. But outside of the stories in the book, the way that she has written the rest of the book, it's also just an incredible read. It's nonfiction, but it kind of has that feel to it, that poetic feel, like it's just a very rich fiction book. So I'm just giving a super brief summary, and like I said, hopefully it'll spark a little bit of interest for you to dig into the book and read it yourself. But yeah, she's talking about nature and what happens to nature as things go on in society. Now, she then relates that to our intended nature, the way that on the inside, our psyche, our soul, our spirit, that spark inside of us, and how we're all born with this spark inside. And I'm using my terms, a little bit of her terms, a little bit of my terms, but how that also, what happens in the external is reflected internal, and vice versa. So the way that we lose touch with our intuition, that instinctive part of us that was put there, and I'm a Christian, so I'm going to put the spin on all of this from time to time from that perspective, from a spiritual perspective. And of course, hopefully you can take that and still get something out of it from the lens of your beliefs and your stance on that too. So hopefully it'll still be very fruitful for you to listen in. But I view this as something that it's like that God part of us almost, that in Christianity it's called the Holy Spirit. When you receive the Holy Spirit, it lives inside of you, and that's who you consult as you go through life, is the Holy Spirit. And so it's kind of like you get disconnected from that part of you, and it's such a deep, intuitive part of us that the closest we can do, and she acknowledges this throughout the book, that language really fails. Words fail, especially when it comes to the most meaningful things in life, right? Words really do fail. But she explains that as she talks about wild woman, a lot throughout the book. She says that wild woman is the force that's behind the psyche, okay? And it's written specifically for women. However, it's, she even says in the book that it's very beneficial for everyone, for men too. But so she calls this the feminine psyche. And men can have feminine qualities, and there's the masculine and feminine, and it's same for women, and the way I view this is the qualities that are specifically discussed in this book are like the feminine aspects of God, because in the Bible it talks about that we are made in the image of God, and I take that to mean more than just the physical. You know what I'm saying? It's like the image of God with our heart, with this spark that we're talking about, his intended human nature, what God intends for us, how we should live. And we're instructed to live aligned and consciously connected with that inner guiding light. And so what happens is we get disconnected, and that makes us very vulnerable to be manipulated by narcissistic individuals and manipulative people in general. And it's kind of like you're wandering around when you get disconnected. And a lot of times it happens, I guess almost every time it happens unconsciously. You don't realize, you think you're just going about life, you're being logical or whatnot in your decisions, and then next thing you know, you find yourself in all these situations. You're like, how did I get here? You're like, what happened? And things that impact that connection, that slowly deteriorate that connection inside of us, are so subtle. And it's like a sleight of hands, with these people, with these manipulative people. And just, even society at large too, because, there's a lot of lust for power out there in governments and people in power, big corporations and things like that. And all of these things influence us, our family of origin, our culture, whatever's hot in society at the moment. So many things influence us on even, a subconscious and unconscious layer. And so it doesn't ping that conscious layer. And because of that, it doesn't always raise the red flags immediately. And it's not until you're already knee deep or more or worse in bad situations in life. And like I said, you're just going, what happened? So I love that she starts out the intro here. I love the name, Singing Over the Bones, because it's like, you wake up one day and that's what you have left. You have bones. And it's like, what happened to the old me? Or what happened to the beauty that used to be here in this land, the nature. And it's just been, exploited. It's been taken advantage of. It's been plundered. It's been, killed. Our spirit, when we go through these things, almost feels the same. Our spirit feels that spark inside of us feels like it's just dwindled down to almost nothing. And it's hard to explain to somebody who hasn't gone through it. And if you haven't already found some communities online or even locally, if you can find them, to join, where there's people who understand, who have been through the same kind of thing as you, I highly recommend that you look for those communities, because you're gonna realize these are now your people. Because when you go through this, you're changed forever, and you're awake on a different level. Whereas before you were just trusting. So yeah, one day you wake up and you're like, you get real with yourself. And you say, you know what, I can't pretend anymore. Literally all that's left is the bones, the meat has been stripped. The essence of who I am, that spark inside of me, has been stripped. And it's the same way with nature, with progress, right? So that's how she opens the introduction. And she ties that into how that relates to us. And she mentions, natural cycles being forced into unnatural rhythms, and that's where, it's not going to work. it's not going to work forever. No matter if it's, us, destroying Mother Earth, or it's allowing people to destroy us because we care about them, or we hope things are going to get better. You can't just continue down a path of destruction and expect things to just, work out in the end. It may, last for a little while, but it's certainly not a forever thing. It can't be. So at some point, the pendulum has to swing back. It has to come back. And that's just the circle of life. if I may borrow the phrase from Disney there. So let me just go ahead and I'm going to read a few quotes here. She studied wolves, and she really hasn't gone into that yet, at least very, very much in depth. But like I said, she's just a really interesting lady. She's got a rich heritage background, educational background, her family background, and then she's loves nature, and she brings that into her writing a lot as well. So she says, healthy wolves and healthy women, and I circled the word healthy because this is not just all women. It's healthy women. So healthy wolves and healthy women share certain psychic characteristics: keen sensing, a playful spirit, and a heightened capacity for devotion. And then it says, wolves and women are relational by nature, inquiring, possessed of great endurance and strength. They are deeply intuitive, intensely concerned with their young, their mate, and their pack. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so then she goes into just the rhythms of nature. She talks about caterpillars and, growing up, around the cornfields, and just butterflies, and all these different caves and the woods. And it's just like I said, I would rather you read this yourself because it's so rich. The way she goes into it, it's her true experiences, but it's written just like a beautiful fiction novel. So and then she starts to go into and this is where on page 6 of the book I wrote the same process as narc abuse. Okay, so she says she calls it the starved soul. And if you've been through this kind of stuff, I'm sure that resonates with you. A starved soul. And she says, but neither have I forgotten the joyous canto hondo, and I can't speak Spanish, but the deep song, the words of which come back to us when we do the work of soulful reclamation, right? Soulful reclamation. And then it says, a woman's issues of soul cannot be treated by carving her into a more acceptable form as defined by an unconscious culture. And I love that she says unconscious culture, right? It's like when you go through these things in life and you wake up, you realize there's other people who haven't woken up yet. Just like you weren't awake at one point. Well, there's a lot of other people who aren't awake either. And then now, here you are navigating life, and it does feel lonely to start with. When you come into this awareness, because you know that you weren't awake for so long, and that's kind of, you're still relating with those kind of people even though you're awake, and so that's kind of all you see to start with. And when you talk about society at large, if you look at the actions of society at large, which again comes from those people in charge, right? It does make sense that she would use the term unconscious culture. Because it feels like if you really knew what you were doing, the damage, that we were doing to the earth, and nature, and animals, and ourselves, and everything, we wouldn't do it. So it has to be an unconscious thing, right? Or maybe not. Maybe it's intentional. Just like narcissism. Maybe it is intentional, right? But for, malevolent, I think it's that, malevolent purposes. It's one of those things where you say a word, and then it's like, it sounds funny, but it's actually correct. So hopefully I'll have to cut this part out. But and so then she goes into the longing that you feel. It's like you've identified that, if something's happened, you've identified that bones are left, and now comes the longing. And you know that something's got to change. That pendulum's got to swing back. And so she says, we eventually must pursue the wildish nature, okay, to get back in balance. So she describes, what it's like when you're trying to force yourself to live without wild woman guiding you, without that connection inside to your intuition, that deep soulful part of your psyche, to live severed from that. What that's like, it's like you're just making bad decisions left and right. You can't make decisions. It's just everything in your life is just off balance. And then how much worse is it that we actually blame ourselves on top of that? When in reality it's kind of like if we had just had that one piece, we had remained connected and centered, then we wouldn't have lived the way we did, during those years of our life. So blaming yourself is not going to help. Just don't do it. We all make mistakes. One thing I like to say is we're perfectly imperfect, and it's true, and it's what makes us different from the narcissist, who will never admit that they're not perfect. So embrace your imperfections, and just understand that they have a purpose on this journey. And sometimes you're not going to see that until down the road at some point, and that's just part of the excitement of living, is that you don't know when you're going to start to see the reason that all the things that happened to you, that you went through, you'll find out one day. So she talks about getting back in balance, and I've got a bunch of notes here in my book. You can see all my markings I'm trying to go through. So she says, once women have lost her, and she personifies this aspect of ourselves, this connection with our deep soulful psyche, our intuition. She personifies that as wild woman. And she says, once women have lost her and then found her again, they will contend to keep her for good. And then once they have regained her, they will fight hard to keep her. For with her, their creative lives blossom. Their relationships gain meaning and depth and health. Their cycles of sexuality, creativity, work, and play are reestablished. They are no longer marks for the predations of others. Okay, so you're not going to be sought after by predators. You're not going to be such a target as much for a predator, for a narcissist. They are entitled equally under the laws of nature to grow and thrive. And then it says, it's a knowing. This connection inside of you is such a deep, rich knowing, where you're if you're living aligned, you're going to make much fewer mistakes. Again, we're human, we're going to make mistakes, but it's going to be way less. And so she says, they know instinctively when things must die and when things must live. They know how to walk away, and they know how to stay. So how many of us have forced ourselves to stay in very unhealthy jobs, relationships, connections of any sort, because it's the right thing to do, or so we think. And so that's, when you restore this connection, then, and you get back in balance, you're going to have that strength, because that knowing is going to be there. You're not going to doubt yourself. And anytime you doubt yourself, see, that's what narcissists bank on. They want you to doubt yourself. And that's why I say I don't think you're going to be as much of a target for a narcissist, because, if you meet one, they can fool just about anybody to some degree. But if you're really solid and strong in yourself and in that connection with your gut, then, they're not going to pass by your bullshit tests. with flying colors. It's going to get caught. Those red flags are going to ping in your mind, and you're going to be able to catch things a lot quicker. But when that's numb, and see, they're going to, if they can slide in, if you've disconnected already for whatever reason. And sometimes I think even when you meet someone like this, they can wear such a great mask in the beginning and be so slick that they can be the ones to sever that connection, and they do it so subtly that you don't catch it. But maybe it's because it wasn't super strong to begin with. Maybe it was there, maybe you had that connection, but maybe due to a challenging childhood, or maybe a previous relationship or whatever, maybe it was there, but it was weak. And so here comes this new person, this new narcissist who sees that in you, that it's it's weak, and they can get you to doubt yourself. And from there, it's like it becomes easy for them. Sad to say, but when you can walk away, then despite what the shock of your family, or your social circles, or if it's a great job and it's high paying, and maybe your spouse values your paycheck more than you, things like that. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you have to be bold, and when you live aligned with this connection, it empowers you to live bold. I mean, think about wolves. She relates wolves to this instinct, and people living aligned with this instinct. I mean, wolves are bold, so you're gonna have that strength. It's gonna be restored when you restored this connection and this trust in yourself. I may have to move. The sun is coming down in my eyes here, but let's see. So I love that. And then it says, when women are with the wild woman, the fact of that relationship glows through them. And it's funny because there's been others who have mentioned how, when you go through this, and if you make it, and some people don't. Some people, it literally snuffs out their soul, and they just can't recover from it. It's tough stuff. And I know this. But if you can push through, and I hope you do, because life's worth living, and you are super valuable. And words fail. So but when you get through the hard stuff, and you're reattached to this guiding light inside of you, you do have a glow. You have a glow. And that glow is going to attract other people who have been through the same thing. It's almost like when you live in that knowing, she mentions that knowing, then it's almost like you can sort of see who else out there has that knowing as well. Who's awake and who's sleepwalking. It gives you the lenses to see that. Reconnecting to our God-given intuition. So she says, when you're aligned, you have this, and you live with this innate integrity and healthy boundaries. And it personifies a force that women cannot live without, literally. It's a wise and knowing nature, is what she calls it. And then she goes into how, trying to describe wild woman, but that it has no name. She's so vast. And that sounds like God to me. You can't box God into, and that's where, you have everybody arguing over God and religion, because we're trying to box God into something that, God is everything. I mean, is he not? That's how I see it. And then she goes into how there's been myths and stories and fairy tales and folklore throughout all these different cultures. And she mentions that, specifically the tales about Wild Woman. And I think that's super cool, that this is like an ancient truth. And that's a whole nother topic, is myths and folklore and fairy tales, and the actual deep truths and meaningful teachings that are captured in them and passed down. You know, historically, modern society doesn't do this, and this troubles me because I think it's very important, actually. But throughout history, you know, a lot of different cultures had this oral tradition of, you know, sitting down with the youth in the tribe or whatnot and sharing these really rich, important life lessons through stories. And this was something I discussed briefly in my other video, my first video about the book, which is how imagery is very impactful. And when people tell stories, it's, you know, it's creating that imagery in our minds. It's almost like it's reaching another part of our mind, our, you know, the depths of our psyche, and it's teaching us on a deeper level. And she touches on that. She goes into that, which is cool. But she specifically mentions all the different stories throughout different cultures that talk about Wild Woman too, and that's cool. She says it's not a religion. It's not a religion. People are so fast nowadays to be like, oh, you know, I thought you were Christian, or I thought, you know, whatever. And it's not a religion. It's a practice. And she says it's a psychology in its truest sense, a knowing of the soul. Without her, women's inner eyes are closed by some shadowy hand, and large parts of their days are spent in a semi-paralyzing ennui, or else wishful thinking. In other words, you're living in naivety. I think that, yeah, you're naive. You're it's like you're blind. You're walking around blind. Of course, you're going to make mistakes. Of course, you're going to pass up great opportunities. You don't, you know, it's like she says, there's this large shadowy hand. I picture it like over the third eye area or whatnot. She calls it the instinctive psyche, and she says we live in a semi-destroyed state. Again, like I said, that flame has dwindled down inside of us. And then from there, you know, living without it, without that connection, how, you know, there's a lot of fear in our life from all different angles. She discusses that in depth, how we live and act in life when we're disconnected from this part of ourselves. She just goes all into that. And then she says, you know, when you start down the path of reconnecting, then it's like, in my words from reading this part of the intro, it's like coming home, you know. And she says, okay, to join the instinctual nature does not mean to come undone, change everything, although it may look that way, you know, to your family and friends. I just want to say that it may look that way, like, oh man, she's gone crazy, he's gone crazy, or, you know, oh yeah, she left her job as a great paying job, or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It's gonna look like that to other people. So you gotta be strong. You gotta just, you gotta be brave. You gotta latch on to this. And that's why I call it the faith walk. So, because once you do latch on and you get realigned, then you're gonna get that strength back, that bravery, that knowing. But until you get there, you know, when you take that first step down the path, it's a step out on faith. Despite all these people giving you hell about it. So to join the instinctual nature does not mean to come undone. Change everything from left to right, from black to white, to move the east to west, to act crazy or out of control. It does not mean to lose one's primary socializations or to become less human. It means quite the opposite. The wild nature has a vast integrity to it. It means to establish territory, to find one's pack. And then she goes into more detail about that, what it really means. And she says that the wild woman's main occupation is invention. So it's like this creative force inside of us. And, you know, people hear the word creativity, and they think of art and music and poetry and things like that, when in reality, and that's true, but, you know, we create our lives every day, you know, by our decisions and our actions. And that's what I think is applicable here. Just being that pilot, or if you're a spiritual person, that co-pilot in your life. In other words, you're taking the reins back from the narcissist, from the person who controlled you. That's what you're doing. So with this wild woman, from the viewpoint of storytelling traditions, she is the female soul, yet she is more. Okay. And then she closes. I'm sorry, she doesn't close. I'm not there yet. But she gets into it starts to read like a love letter. You know, she's so passionate about the essence of Wild Woman. And that's literally how it reads to me, like a love letter. It's cool. So, and then she gets into her methods of therapy. She's very versed in a background with the studies of Carl Jung. And then she says, we contact the wildish, like this is part of her therapy, her practices with her clients. We contact the wildish self through specific questions and through examining fairy tales, folk tales, legends, and mythos. And then the craft of making is an important part of the work. Something I thought about getting into at some point in my life was art therapy. Didn't get very far with it, but I do have a very rich background in art. So, yeah. So bringing literally, you know, hands-on into that practice of that creation process, which is very much tied to our intuition. And then she talks about how these teachings that I was talking about earlier that used to be a very important part of different cultures, to teach the youth within those cultures about life in general and to stay on the path, you know, the right way to live. All of these stories have been, well, first of all, the traditions have kind of come to a halt largely in modern society. And then also the stories themselves, she talks about, have been changed, you know, edited, you may say, to be appropriate to whatever is considered appropriate at that time in that particular part of society. And you know that changes. It's constantly changing. And so as these stories are being edited throughout time, they're kind of losing that substance. However, she says that again, the bones of the stories, you know, they're still there and they can be reconstructed, you know. And so it's important. That's you know, if you want to, as you grow older in life, if you want to take what you've been through in life as being very important with your purpose in life, to possibly be a guiding light, to help be a guiding light for the youth, then that would be something to consider, to take these old you know, folk tales and reconstruct them from the bones so that you know, it'll be just rich stories that these kids are going to remember, to help them stay on that path and to never get disconnected from that inner guiding light. So she discusses that. Her qualifications, all the different cultures she's familiar with, she goes into that. She says, story is far older than the art and science of psychology, and will always be the elder in the equation, no matter how much time passes. So, yeah, again, it's that deeper level of psychology. And then she gets into something that I kind of had to, you know, really stop and focus on, because I thought this was a really interesting choice of words here. She talks about a trance teller, and I thought, you mean a narcissist? Because that's how it feels, right? Somebody who's able to snow over and deceive people. And then, you know, when you're secured as what they call the main supply with a narcissist, it's kind of like you are in a trance. It's like you're brainwashed, sort of. You're just which is where they want you. They don't want you doing any kind of, free thinking or anything like that. So when I heard, I was reading Trance Teller, I thought, okay. So, but here's what she says. She says, one of the oldest ways of telling, which intrigues me greatly, is the passionate trance state, wherein the teller, which is the storyteller, senses the audience. Okay, they're really in tune with the audience, be it an audience of one or of many, and then enters a state in the world between worlds, the world between worlds, where a story is attracted to the trance teller and told through her. This is a storyteller furthering soul making. The trance teller calls on El Duende, I hope I'm saying that right, the wind that blows soul into the faces of listeners. So it's a really rich, passionate practice, this storytelling of these important folk tales. And she says, this is just a sampling of her beautiful writing. A trance teller learns to be psychically double-jointed through the meditative practice of story, that is, training oneself to undo certain psychic gates and ego apertures in order to let the voice speak, the voice that is older than the stones. It's like a peeling away of the layers, right? The layers of bullshit that we've been conditioned to live under. When this is done, the story may take any trail, be turned upside down, be filled with porridge and dumped out for a poor person's feast, be filled with gold for the taking, or chase the listener into the next world. The teller never knows how it will all come out, and that is at least half of the moist magic of story. So it's just a joy to read, truly, it is. And that, it kind of seems like, do you really have to use all those words? Isn't that fluff? Is it fluff? Or does it really, would you really get the same message, if she didn't use all those, descriptive words? I don't think you would. I don't think you'd really get the point. I think again, that's the difference in just modern psychology that gives you bullet points, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you have, the lessons that come from stories. And I think that's the point. It's painting that picture, painting that mental image that does it. And she reiterates next that this book is for everyone, not just for women. And again, she says it's a return to their instinctive lives, their deepest knowing. And then she closes the introduction with, for us, the issue is simple. Without us, Wild Woman dies. And without Wild Woman, we die. So, Pura Vida, for true life, both must live. And I like how she says true life, because imagine getting to the end of your life, and if you're lucky enough to be able to reflect back on your life, then imagine thinking about, did you really live a true life? I think that this connection, that is the whole point of this book, is what determines, did you live a true life or not? How many regrets are you going to have? Because the alternative is living a totally self-sacrificial life, not like to benefit humanity. I'm not talking about like those kind of people, selfless. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about sacrificing for nothing, just to be like the destruction of nature, just to be plundered, to be exploited, for no good use. And when you stay, that's the thing, when you stay in a bad situation, be it a job, a friendship, a marriage, whatever it is, a family entanglement, when it's killing that part of you, that soul part of you, and you force yourself to stay because it's the right thing to do, that's where you really got to question, is that really the right thing to do? Because in your bones it's not. You know in your bones it's not the right thing to do. And imagine, though, living your whole life denying that voice that's calling you inside, denying, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then getting to the end of your life. And, well, I mean, at some point, we're all going to get to the point where we don't have any more chances. We run out of opportunities. It's too late. There will come a point where it's too late. So if you're fortunate enough to have woken up to what's going on, and the fact that you have been living disconnected from this, your true self, then you're lucky, man. If you've woken up in time, you gotta be bold enough, you gotta be brave enough to act on it, but you gotta do it safely. You gotta be smart about it. You gotta, get some professional assistance and guidance and help, if need be. And so, life is a gift. Don't waste it. And if you're still stuck in some situation like that, I just implore you to follow what's left of that spark inside of you. So we'll dig into this is 40 minutes so far, and I know I went kind of slow, but we'll dive into chapter 1 on a separate video. And like I said, if you just want to really go deep into this, I would just type in the title of the book in the YouTube search bar, and you're going to find all kind of stuff out there on it. So I hope you enjoyed it. I thank you guys for coming along with me, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks.